Hi, I'm Laura and welcome to my channel Aquamarine18. Thanks for stopping by. I am here with my response for day 20 of the 31 Days of Witchcraft hosted by Heather Carter. And of course there's a link in the description box below to more about the tag and the prompts for the month of May. So the question for day 20 is, what do you do when you're in a witchy funk? And I will just first say the way that I interpret this question and interpret witchy funk is, what do you do when either you haven't engaged with your spiritual or magical practice in a while, or when it's not calling to you in the same way that it normally does, or you're struggling to get into the frame of mind to engage in your practice, something like this, right, where you're in a lull or a bit of a rut, right? And so I have lots and lots of thoughts on this. The first thing that I'll say is that, if I observe myself in that kind of funk, the first thing I'll probably do is kind of settle into it a little bit and try to explore whether or not it's actually a problem. For me, having a break doesn't mean that my practice is no longer important. It doesn't mean that I no longer have a practice. Maybe I just need a break, and maybe I'm in a funk because my mind needs to be somewhere else, for example, and that can be totally fine. So if I notice that, my tools aren't calling out to me, or my sacred space isn't calling out to me, or I haven't sat down there in a while, I try not to necessarily jump straight to, like, something is horrifyingly wrong, wrong with me, or wrong in my life, or wrong in my practice, because it's not necessarily true, right? There's lots of reasons that I might not, be there for a while, and that can be okay. If I come to the feeling that there is some kind of an issue, right, and that I'm in a funk, I don't want to be in a funk, but I'm struggling to get out of it, then my next kind of thinking is, well, why, am I in that funk? Because it may have something to do with, my practice itself, I guess, like not satisfying me in particular kind of ways or something like that. But it may have something to do with, something else entirely. Just, to give a personal example from my life, for the last number of years, like since 2011 or so, I'm not doing this anymore, but for a number of years, I had a tenant living in my house, different tenants over the course of that time, but I was renting out space in my house. And over that number of years, there were times, and like certain people more so than others, that there was very little quiet time in my house, that the atmosphere in my house was not pleasant, that, things felt really negative, that I felt really uncomfortable, that it was hard to focus on anything. For the most part, things were fine, but there were occasionally these periods of things just really not feeling fine in my home. And my home is mostly where my spiritual and magical practice happen. And so I would get in ruts in those times sometimes, where, it's really hard for me to do things that I really like to do and do regularly, even just something like meditate for a little while, because either my house is really loud or because the atmosphere in my house feels like shit. And in those kind of circumstances, the rut is not about my practice itself. The witchy funk is not about the witchy practice in and of itself. It's something completely extraneous to it that is giving me a hard time, right? A heavy time at work, of a lot of work, right? In my lines of work, I have 2 jobs. Both have very, very busy kind of peak periods in terms of the amount of hours and energy they demand of me, and then much, much quieter times, right? And in those really, really peak times, my spiritual practice can really, dwindle to the bare necessities because I'm so busy, right? And that's kind of a funk, but it's not a funk because I'm, in a bad place per se. It's just not my focus at the time. So that can be fine too. So if I'm in a funk, is it a problem? Maybe it's not. If it is the problem something to do with my practice? Or is the problem something to do with something else completely that is just either affecting my space or affecting my mindset or something like that? Because if that's the case, if it's a problem that has nothing to do with my practice itself, then the solution to that funk might have nothing to do with the practice either. Like the solution to that funk might be, making changes in my living situation. The solution to that funk might be managing the time I spend on my work, on my job better, right? So always just thinking about what I might initially diagnose as a witchy funk or spiritual funk is actually coming from, because where it's coming from is going to determine, what, if anything, I want to do about it, if that makes sense. So beyond that, I'll just end with the idea that when I have taken a break, we'll say, or I've been in a funk, I've been in a rut, I haven't been, spiritually or magically engaged for a while. When I'm returning to that, I try to do so in a way that is as unintimidating as possible. I try to return to the aspects of my practice that I feel most at home in, most comfortable in, most comforted by, most supported by. I don't launch into learning some totally new, totally new thing that I've never done before, because, that's probably not the time necessarily for that. And I try to also return to magical practice or spiritual practice in ways that are just the most rejuvenating and nourishing as possible and the least energetically demanding and draining as possible, right? If I haven't done anything that I would class as remotely magical or spiritual or witchy at all for quite a long time, maybe the first thing I go back to is a 1-card draw in the morning and a little bit of free writing. Maybe I go back to, very short meditations. Maybe I go back to, working with oils and herbs to create a ritual bath for myself that then, feels really healing and, can get off some of the nonsense, that has been clinging to me. So I try to just be easy on myself when I'm in a witchy funk, and be easy on myself when I'm trying to get myself out of one. So that's my answer for day 20. I'm keen to hear what others say about this. I know that we probably all have, different strategies for navigating these kinds of times, which can be difficult times, right? And I think that it can be, supportive and helpful to hear how others deal with these kinds of ruts or kind of lulls in their practice. So I look forward to the discussion. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you again tomorrow.